to network, remember, once we're through, this is some of the stuff I want to try to keep pushing and getting you guys, encouraging you to network with each other when the doors open and before the doors close, because just like Michael and David just now, some of that stuff is exciting, and we need to try to, I want to make sure that you guys are connecting with each other better. That is one of the other things, as we were talking about a while ago, we're looking for giving our SBDC advisors more information where we can do better at serving our clients. That's one thing, but the other is we're trying to also do better at creating networking. And I shout out to our Oklahoma SBDC folks who did, we feel like has done a great job of creating a cohort type of environment with their folks. So we're trying to follow their lead as we do this. With that in mind, I am ready we got a couple more that popped in that we were looking for. So Laurie, I'll turn it over to you, let you do your introductions, and then we'll follow up after everybody's through.
Okay. So we have Mr. Ted Bajewski has joined us today. He is the lead for S&T for Space Force. And I thought maybe, Ted, we could start with you giving them a little bit of history on your background, because your background would really be fitting with some of these folks here. And again, just so you know, I mean, I've known Ted a long time, and the challenges that we're having, Ted really understands, because he's highly technical. He's very familiar with supply chain and very versed, obviously, in space. But Ted, I'll let you take it from there. If you want to fill us.
Laurie, so I've been working with small businesses for a long time. Starting with, I was in industrial policy, space industrial policy advisor to Under Secretary of the Air Force. Then I went to NASA, and I was the industrial policy and supply chain management chief for human spaceflight. And then I went from there to principal director of manufacturing industrial base policy for the Department of Defense. And then I ran the Small Business Innovation Research program for DoD. And then I I ran the Rapid Innovation Fund program, which is a $250 million per year program focusing on small businesses and innovation. And then from there, I went to developmental test evaluation and prototyping, prototyping new systems for the DoD. And now I'm working for the Space Force and setting up their S&T organization within the Space Force. Awesome. And I'm very happy to be here to talk to everyone. Thanks for reminding me.
Yeah, and I also want to introduce Rick Slater. Rick, if you don't mind, can you unmute? He's looking at me. Rick worked for NASA, and I want him to unmute and tell you, but can you introduce yourself, Rick? Because we're going to talk about NASA and Space Force today. And Rick was with NASA for quite a few years and out of the small business office. So if you could just introduce yourself, Rick.
Oh, okay. Rick Slater. I was with NASA for 31 years. I came in as a photoscience person in the photographic area, and then went into the digital area. We kind of took it into the digital area in the 90s. Then I was with the IT group. I had IT security for a while, and I also had the business office in the IT directorate for quite a few years. And then I became the vendor manager up on staff. And then my last 4 years, I moved over to the small business group in procurement. And that's where I really got associated with Alan and others with the SBDC. And from there, after I retired in December, I started working with Alan and the SBDC group here in Kansas.
Awesome. So Alan, if you want to share the screen, maybe we can get started on the presentation, and I would welcome Rick and Ted to jump in if there's anything that I say incorrectly or you have added information. So, okay, so today's focus is on who's who in space. And I think it's really pertinent today because of all the things going on with the creation of Space Force. It's a little bit confusing as to where Space Force resides, how it's structured, and how they relate to NASA. So I thought I'd just kind of run through some basics. And then again, I'm hoping that Rick and Ted will jump in and add further information. So next slide.
Whoops.
Back one, I think. Yeah. So basically NASA and Space Force are the two leads for space. That's not to say that other commands don't interact with NASA and don't interact with Space Force. That's certainly not the case. As a matter of fact, even Army Corps does a lot of work with NASA. And but the two main leads for space in the federal arena are NASA and Space Force. Next slide, Alan. So that's the logo that they have developed for Space Force. And you can go ahead and go to the next slide. But for those of you who are familiar with Space Force, it started with the Air Space Command in 1982. And actually, Ted pointed out to me that it goes even further back, that Air Force was into space even predating NASA. What year was it, Ted? Because I didn't know this factoid. Do you remember?
I didn't know the factoid either. No.
Well, anyway, just suffice it to say that Air Force was dealing in space ahead of NASA. So it's always been a focus of Air Force to include space. So headquartered out of Peterson Air Force Base right now. And this is confusing, Ted. I may even ask you this question because they went through this long process to rename a new headquarters, which I'm getting into in a minute, but it's a little confusing. For the time being, everything's staying out of Colorado. I will say that most of the assets and the big time investments for space are in Colorado at Peterson Air Force Base. And I really, quite frankly, can't imagine them moving those assets. But anyway, they're
So,
kind of trying to figure that out. Yeah.
So Lori, Space Force headquarters of the Pentagon right now. The assets in Colorado are going to be part of U.S. Space Command, but headquarters is in DC for Space Force.
Thanks for that clarification. But I know Colorado was in the running for what they said would be Space Force's new headquarters. And I'm going to ask you questions on that, Ted, because I thought it was kind of confusing when they named Huntsville. But I got a
Space
slide
Command.
on it.
That's Space Command's headquarters, not Space Force's headquarters.
Okay, thank you. So on December 20th, 2019, Space Force was created, and they are a new branch of the military. So they're the 6th branch of the military. And I was under the impression that Air Force Space Command turned into Space Force, but Ted shared with me that they actually created a new combatant command. That is U.S. Space Force or U.S. Space Command. Did I say that correctly, Ted?
Yeah, well, you're right to begin with. Air Force Space Command did become the Space Force, but then after it became the Space Force, they created a new command, U.S. Space Command, so they could have a space-oriented combatant command.
So they just keep kind of changing things up, and it's hard to stay current on this stuff. A lot of times I'll call Ted and said, what does that mean now? So anyway.
It's confusing.
All right, Alan. So the main thing, main reason why they created Space Force is to elevate the importance of space. It was suggested that a new military branch be created. Trump got behind it. Congress approved it in 19, and 16,000 personnel were transferred to Space Force. And those personnel are in certain areas, although I know I have read that there are folks and actually I know because I've been to those locations, but they've got Space Force folks in Colorado and Utah, kind of all over the place from what I've seen. And Space Force, by the way, is placed under the authority of the Secretary of the Air Force. Anything you want to add to that, Ted?
Yeah, so the Department of the Air Force now is made up of the Air Force and the Space Force. Just like the Department of the Navy is made up of the Navy and the Marines. It's very analogous.
Gotcha. Okay. And I believe, Ted, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first year that Space Force has had control of their budget. Is that correct? I had read
yeah,
that.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Just wanted to clarify. All right. Alan, if you want to go to the next slide. So the primary mission of the U.S. Space Force is directed by Congress is to maintain, protect, expand U.S. fleet. And really their biggest focus from what I've read is satellites. Is that, and ISR, is that right, Ted?
Yeah, it's satellites and it's protecting satellites and the environment that satellites operate in, as well as cislunar space.
And one of the reasons, again, I wanted to provide this education, first of all, because Ted was kind enough to educate us all, including me at times. But they're going to have, they put in a budget of 17.4 billion for FY22. I'm not saying that's going to stick, but there's going to be a pretty significant investment. And my understanding is the bulk of that investment is going to be around innovation and tech. Next slide. So main Space Force bases, which by the way, Ted clarified to me, and I was not aware of this, that a lot of these bases that were formerly Air Force bases are now being called Space Force bases. But as I started looking into it, some of them, their names have transferred over to be a Space Force base versus Air Force base, and some have not. So I don't know, Ted, do you think all of them are going to switch over to be SFB versus AFB, or you think there's going to be that they just haven't transferred over yet, or?
Yeah, I think they'll eventually be all Space Force bases, unless they're joint bases.
So I thought that was interesting. I didn't even know that didn't notice that they were changing the name of these bases, but I think we're going to see that more and more. So Alan, next slide. So this is the announcement for the U.S. Space Command headquarters. What was really confusing to me is they named Huntsville, and then it kind of went radio silent. And then as I was seeing more and more publications, they said, okay, we picked Huntsville, but it's pending till 2023 that it's going to be in Huntsville. And in the meantime, we're keeping it in Colorado Springs. So I don't quite know what that means, but just wanted to make you aware that there is a focus on Huntsville, and they predominantly pointed to the assets and different resources in Huntsville. NASA Marshall is there, and you've got Redstone Arsenal and a lot of folks reloading to Huntsville. So you're going to see some activity related to Huntsville, although I still say it's always going to have a big connection to Colorado Springs in that area. Alan, next slide. So I've talked to folks that I knew at NASA, probably back when Ted was at NASA, and I never saw a lot of collaboration, or as much collaboration as I would have thought, between DoD and NASA although they've always done some collaboration, in my opinion, it was the appearance of the fact that NASA is a civilian command. They didn't want to be associated with a military command. But recently there was an MOU signed between General John J. Raymond with Space Force and DOD, and they identified these areas highlighted: human space flight, space policy, scientific research, the list there as, hey, these are truly areas that we think we should better collaborate and leverage. So my prediction is that we're going to see more and more collaboration and interest in work between DOD and NASA. Ted, do you think that's true, not true? Are you hearing that, seeing that?
I'm not seeing that right now, but we're busy just trying to create the Space Force. I would assume that once the Space Force is created, up and running, that there would probably be more collaboration with NASA. Yeah.
Rick, in your experience, did you used to see a lot of collaboration, or?
Actually, there was an awful lot. I know at the headquarters level, they always kept it separate, but Johnson Space Center, actually in the 80s, after they created the Air Force or the Space Force Command, the astronauts for the Air Force trained at Johnson Space Center. And I think around 1987 or something like that, NASA actually took the Air Force astronauts and brought them right in to NASA. They actually became NASA civil servants. So the training was being done there, and I'd have to say there's an awful lot that's being done on all the categories that you listed there. Some more than others. I would be surprised if, when they're all said and done, and they really look at how many resources they have and everything, resources will probably lead them to doing more cooperation between the two. That's how it always works.
And I'll add to that I've been seeing more and more discussion and cooperation in the manufacturing space, particularly in additive. My observation is that NASA has really led the way on additive manufacturing and is doing much, much more, and is further ahead than DOD from what I've experienced. Ted, have you seen that? Do you know of it? In talking with John
Yeah.
Vickers and the crew at NASA, they've really, really invested a lot and printed a lot of parts that they're using in space on flight.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So that's another area. It wasn't listed as a focus area that they decided to collaborate on, but that doesn't mean that they're not. So one other thing to note.
Got a question for you then. Based on what you're telling us, and knowing we're going into this, in the new expanded Encountering Innovation matchmaking, how does our focus towards primes, and then knowing that we're pitching innovation to the Tech Scouts, how does that affect first of all, how does that affect us as SBDC? How should we focus to where we can get innovation reviewed like we do now with Encountering Innovation? And then second of all, how does that affect our clients? What's the best way to spend our energy in being able to share innovation?
I'm going to let Ted and Rick answer this, but the one thing I wanted to remind Ted, because I was involved in this effort, there was a study, correct, Ted, that they looked at the supply chain for NASA and the supply chain for DOD, because the concern was with changes going on with NASA and privatizing NASA, that there was going to be a lot of companies negatively impact in the supply chain. So they were trying to see what suppliers crossed over between space and DoD. And Ted, weren't you like behind that?
Yeah, I love that.
study, or-
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Could you kind of speak to that? Because first of all, I'm too old and I don't remember details, but it seems like there was real concern, but in the end, they decided there was a lot of overlap. Can you expound
Yeah.
on it? Remember?
yeah, there was a lot of overlap in the two supply chains. So we were working, that was when I was at NASA, and we were working with the DoD at the time to try to preserve those supply chains.
So I guess
And-
my point is, in the end, a lot of those primes that work with NASA also work with DoD. It just might be another department, right? A separate
Yeah.
department, but
Yeah.
they work with both.
Right. Yep.
Did that help, Alan, or did it make it more muddled?
Well, so I am keenly interested in our most logical next step. So if we, for instance, what we've learned is that in order to get who we really want to come for matchmaking, we're going to ask for CTOs from NASA space centers to show up. Therefore, and that we've gotten the checkoff from NASA headquarters. With those two things happening, then we get primes with Rick's background and his connections. The primes come. The primes are going to find probably few really good connections that they will contract. But because they come, then the tier 2, 3, and 4 companies come. Jim Baker, as an example, who has presented, he's going to be looking at other companies. So our job is to get out our advanced manufacturing and our manufacturing, innovating manufacturing to show up for the matchmaking. Although their ultimate goal is primes, we want to make sure they understand that business to business, small business is going to happen. So I'm sitting here going, what do I need to do in that? And Ted, I loved your example that you used for Marines to Navy, Space Force to Air Force. That was great. That was like, okay, I kind of get it now. In that same vein, knowing that we've started with Brett Sheringhausen and then Tim Fowler, and then the list goes on. Ted, you were at our first 2017 Encountering Innovation and spoke to it. So we've come a long way in certain ways, but in other ways, all we've done is we've just let our word of mouth reputation expand with the Tech Scouts. Okay, so it's become more of them telling each other they come. I don't go working real hard to try to bring them to the conference now. So the question really is, do we need to do something proactive in order to get NASA and Space Force and now Space Command? That's, and I got to say, I'm a little confused. So Space Command is now one of the combatant commands. Is that correct?
Yeah. So in the military, there's combatant commands, and then there's services, and the services train and equip the forces, and the combatant commands are the ones that fight the wars. So so you'd want to talk to the services, not necessarily the combatant commands. Well, I guess you could talk to the combatant commands. Like Special Operations Command, they acquire and they fight the wars, but only SOCOM and TRANSCOM are the only two co-commands that actually acquire anything. So all the other co-commands depend on the services for acquiring things. So the Space Force will be the acquisition organization that would supply the people and weapons for Space Command, which would be the co-command.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I've got something to add on this. When one of the trends, and we've seen it started in the 90s and it's really taken off in the last 5 to 10 years. Your large prime contractors, the Boeings, the Raytheons, et cetera, they are, for all intents and purposes, getting out of manufacturing or engineering parts and subassemblies. When it comes to if you went back to the 80s and 90s, there was a ton of money. And what say a Boeing would do is if 3D printing had started in the 80s, they would have been given an enormous amount of money to create their own infrastructure to do 3D printing. That doesn't happen anymore. And so I had spoken with 3 of the large ones, and Jacobs was one of them, and they said, hey, Rick, we're moving away from that level of manufacturing where the manufacturing is moving so fast, we do not have the money to keep an infrastructure for every one of these new technologies that's coming along. So what we're doing is looking for small businesses that have that capability. I believe that's our in. Our in is the fact that when Raytheon is giving a job, they don't have any way of doing some of the new technology. So that's why they reach out and find these small businesses. And that's where we need to focus. One of the best things that we can do to help these small businesses is prepare them to work with the large primes. That's one of the best things we can do. I talked to some of the small business liaison officers, and at NASA, those are the ones I work with. And they're business people, and in almost every case, they're in the procurement area, and if they're not in charge of it, they're usually a deputy or something like that. And those folks would tell me there are technically great companies all over the place, but their ability to deal with quality codes, their ability to work with the way the bureaucracy manhandles them, if you will, they're not used to doing that, especially if they've been mainly commercial or they've been oil and gas or something along those lines. They're not used to that. That's one of the focuses that we could have where we could help them. And that's where I would put my money. Another point, if you look at SpaceX, SpaceX is the exact opposite of what I just said. SpaceX, about the only small businesses that they purchase from are for parts, or excuse me, not parts, raw materials. They do almost everything in-house, at least for NASA. I'm not sure what they're doing for other things, but they maintain everything in-house. So they're the exact opposite. They're not reaching out. But the Boeings and the Raytheons and the Jacobs, and I could go on, they are doing the exact opposite of SpaceX. And so these small businesses are prime candidates to help them. So A, introducing them is good, but B, we need to get closer to those large primes somehow and be able to find out what are they really looking for. And that's part of what we're going to try to do with not just the matchmaking, but the whole, Encountering Innovations event. So that's really a thrust. The biggest thing being small businesses are going to be the lifeblood of these large primes. And it started 5 or 10 years ago, and it's really hit a peak now. So that's where we want to put our, that's really where we want to put our focus, is having the lists of the capabilities and drawing out these small businesses and preparing them to be able to work with the large primes. And when you do that, what you're also preparing them for is something that they've been telling us for the past couple, or telling me for the past couple of years. We want to meet other small businesses so we can join forces and compete for contracts, because we're not big enough to do it ourselves on a lot of these contracts. We need to, it's got to be a joint operation, if you will, in doing that. So I'll get off my soapbox now, but that's my thrust to where we really need to be moving.
Do you want to add anything to that, or? We're good?
Sorry.
Yeah,
Just asking-
I'd agree with,
Okay.
I'd agree with his assessment of SpaceX. That was when I was at NASA. That was one thing we were concerned about in terms of supply chain, because SpaceX does everything in-house.
And I just noticed SpaceX launched a satellite for Space Force recently. So they're really going to be probably connected with both NASA and Space Force moving forward to be a direct supplier, is what I've been reading at least.
Yeah, they've been a direct supplier for quite a while already.
Okay. All right, next slide.
Oops.
So
I-
NASA,
I'm-
did you go
I'm
too?
trying to-
Okay.
Yeah, I did. I'm trying to get the control back. I'm losing control.
So,
Give me a
so-
second. There it
yeah.
is. I was trying to get it to come back. There we go.
okay.
Sorry about that.
So NASA is an independent agency. Again, the thing to understand is NASA is a civilian agency, not a military agency. So their focus is very different. Responsible for the civilian program as well as aeronautics and space research. Next slide. So created in 1958, and again, I can't remember what Ted told me. It seems like you said, Ted, it was like 52 or 48 that Air Force got into space, but their headquarters was created by, or NASA was created by Eisenhower, and again, headquartered out of DC right now. Next slide.
NASA grew out of the ballistic missile program of the Department of Defense. So when they were launching people into space, those were on converted ballistic missiles. So the Air Force
Wow.
doing the ballistic missiles first.
Interesting. So there are just tons of ties between the two. Next slide.
Before we go forward, I think you need to recognize where Dwight Eisenhower was from. Hello? Kansas.
Was
Okay.
he really? I did not know
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Abilene, right?
Yes. That's where his presidential library is. So once again, why is NASA just now finally circling back around? And now we got Space Force, everyone focused on Kansas. Now we know why.
And I'm gonna tell you right now, if anybody ever gets on Jeopardy, I'm the last person you want to call because I never know the answer to those questions. All right. Bill Nelson, former astronaut, is actually the new administrator of NASA. And what's just too funny to me is I met with Bill Nelson when I first took over Doolittle. He was still hanging out down in Florida. So I just thought that was really interesting. So there you go, Florida, Alan, Bill Nelson. All
I
right.
know it's Lake Cheney. You keep thinking that's over by the bay.
So NASA locations around the country. I just thought I'd put that map up so that you guys can have it later, but all different areas of focus. And I noticed we cut off the name Shreveport. They're not gonna like that when it comes around, but anyway, I just thought it was good to see where their locations are around the country. Next slide.
If that's Shreveport, Shreveport has moved.
Yeah, Shreveport, I thought that was
Shreveport's up
closer
here.
to Houston.
Yeah.
I can't see the names, but Shreveport is a command, right? Or no, I'm thinking of
Schriever. You're thinking of Schriever.
Schriever. Yes,
The point in Louisiana you're referencing to is the propulsion laboratory east of New Orleans, right before the Mississippi border. Stemmons.
Stennis.
I think I could be
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah, I know the
It is
chief
the
technology
propulsion.
officer
Yeah.
there. It
Yep.
is Stennis, you're right. Like I said, mine's cut off. I didn't do that slide very well, but I just wanted everybody to kind of see where they were located.
Yeah,
So-
White Sands might be a little irritated too, that you cut them off, but
So we're going to change our name from Lunch and Learn to Lunch and Learn and Research.
Yeah.
or lunch and really learn.
So this is the part, and this is all being worked out as we speak, and a lot of this stuff is ever changing. But AFWorks took over SBIRs and STTRs for Air Force, and as it stands right now, Ted, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but right now, AFWorks is going to be managing all your SBIRs and STTRs for Space Force at this point in time. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And again, the main reason why I wanted to point that out is that Space Force has a $17.4 billion budget for research and S&T. And I don't know where that money was taken across the Joint Command. I found that they had $2 billion in FY21, and right now the request is in for $17.4 billion. Still being kicked around the Senate and Congress, but that's what the administration is pushing for.
Lori, is that across the FIDUP?
I don't know the answer to that. I'll get you the information I found, but I've been hearing more and more that they're pushing for a really large budget for Space Force for R&E. And so I think it's important to note for these innovators where they can go for SBIR, STTRs when it comes to Space Force, who's going to manage it, and just to point out that it's going to be quite a big chunk of change if they get their way.
Lori, if I could ask a question for yourself and Ted and Richard here on this specific topic, because it is interesting and I think noteworthy, especially for small businesses here that are pursuing some innovative ideas. Although there are the open topics that AFWorks does, and I would assume would be applicable to Space Force, is there also anything that we could be doing, i.e. like the Kansas and the Oklahoma SPDCs, to create some sort of interactive opportunity to discuss with some project managers at Space Force to almost go about the old-fashioned route where it's a discussion to get thoughts conveyed as it pertains to future requirements that could be identified?
That's a good Ted question.
Sure. They're always interested in discussing that. A lot of that's handled through AFRL and SMC.
And that's
Who was
Space
it?
Missile Command and Air Force Research Labs, correct, Ted? Just a
Space and Missile Systems Center, SMC, and Air Force Research Labs.
And then where does the Space Capabilities Office reside? Is that under you? Or is that under the SMC Center?
Space Capabilities.
Yeah, there is a newly set up Space Capabilities Office. So maybe they're just trying to figure out where that's going to reside. And
You mean the Rapid Capabilities Office?
they called it the Space Capabilities Office. And I was kind of surprised that they were, I hadn't heard of it. And that was going to be one of my questions I was going to ask you, because they talked about setting up the Space Capabilities Office. And I was curious where that would reside. And
There's
again,
a
you guys are just setting up, so you might not be able to answer it, but.
There's the Space Rapid Capabilities Office. Don't know of a Space Capabilities Office. It's
So
probably
where does the rapid capabilities reside? Is that under S&T, or is that going to be under AFWork, managed by AFRL and AFWorks? Do you know?
the Space Rapid Capabilities Office is classified organization that directly reports to General Raymond, the head of space operations, and the Assistant Secretary of Air Force. There's a separate organization parallel to Space and Missile Systems Center.
So that wouldn't be a target. I mean, that'd be a hard target to get access to.
Yeah. Well, unless you're in the know, yeah.
Okay. I was just curious about that. So as Ted said, they're kind of still structuring Space Force. I know there's discussions of launching a Space Works, because I was talking to the office that was working on that out in New Mexico. And again, that's still being shaped and formed. The discussions I heard last were that Space Works would be under AFWorks.
Yeah.
But again, I think they're still trying to figure out what that's going to look like. There is actually a new draft PIA out around that's coming out of AFRL as an RV, which is the Space Vehicle Command, and I believe that's going to be the precursor to Space Works. But that's recent news. I just read through it. I've got some questions and I'm doing some further research, but I think you're going to start seeing a Space Works that is going to be releasing specific opportunities for Space Force, is what my understanding is. Again,
So most of the, I should say that most of the space portion of AFRL is in Kirkland, New Mexico.
and that's who is going to be over that PIA, as a matter of fact. It
Yeah.
came out of Kirkland.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it's actually a combination of space vehicles and directed energy that's going to be over that PIA, and who's
Yeah.
involved in it.
Kirkland.
And then from NASA's standpoint, and Rick, you may know things changing with that, but SBIR, STTR has been managed out of headquarters. There's a separate program that's called NASA iTech, but recently NASA iTech was brought underneath the SBIR, STTR office. And that's just in discussions about how they're going to structure and restructure. So just be on the lookout for you small businesses that want to get involved with NASA. I would totally connect with NASA iTech and see what programs are out there and try to get to know that group. Because again, my understanding is there's discussions about rearranging SBIRs, STTRs, and tying it more closely to NASA iTech. There was an RFI on that as well. Go ahead, Rick.
Now, and talking with a couple of folks out of the chief technologist office here at JSC, they've said exactly the same thing. They're trying, they need to find a way that they can get them more engaged, more folks involved with it, and streamline the process is really what it boils down to. And so that's why they're looking at, they're looking for a way to kind of overhaul the thing and make it just a little more efficient. But it's going to be a while before it's probably going to be 6 months before they actually have something.
Yeah. So again, to me, and Rick, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I were a small business and I wanted to engage with NASA and find out what's going on, I would definitely check out NASA iTech, and I put their website on this slide.
Yep. No, I absolutely agree with that.
Next slide. So anybody who wants to interact with Ted has further questions. I mean, this is probably going to be ever changing. Is that correct, Ted?
At least next year, yeah.
So you know, I see that this command's dissolved. Next thing I know, he comes back and says, yeah, guess what? They brought it back as a combatant command. And, you know, just when I think I know what's going on, things change. And I see things, and I call Ted, and Ted's like, what? So it's just they're evolving, if you will. But I really think it's going to be worth paying attention to, because I think there's going to be a lot of funding and a lot of focus on space, and a lot of dollars put towards space on innovation and tech. So I just kind of wanted to educate people on where it's at now, know that it's a fast moving target, but now I'm hoping you know a little bit more about Space Force and NASA and what they're up to. So if anybody wants to get further questions to Ted or Rick, actually, for that matter, they can funnel them through their SBDC counselors, who can reach out and get those questions to Ted and Rick. And Alan, you want to take over? And
So Ted, the one thing I would ask of you is, I'd like for us to be able to have you or whoever you designate to attend our Encountering Innovation this year. Our conference is going to be, we're enhancing it by bringing Rick in along with Lori to assist with what we've been doing. We are creating a matchmaking program within Encountering Innovation as a conference, where our focus is primes, NASA, and DoD, where NASA is the NASA primes are our first focus. And then with Tim Fowler working with us closely, he's insisting that we bring DoD primes in that mix as well. And so we're doing an Encountering Innovation style matchmaking, where we will bring or attract clients or advanced manufacturing and innovating manufacturers. We will go through a capability matrix survey. Rick will create the capability matrix and then share that with the primes. They will then decide who they want to meet with, and then they're meeting at our conference. So we're trying to create more commercialization opportunity at the conference. We know it doesn't happen at the conference, but the beginning of it, instead of just having tech scouts there to have their private pitch that they see with our innovators, that we actually create opportunities for the manufacturing. And with what you're doing, it seems like you would be the key person, or whoever you designate. I realize as you're setting up shop, you may be early in it, but if you come to it, then what we hope for is that what you see, you can say, okay, here's in our strategic planning, one of our steps is I wish ... So if you come to this, then when you go, gee, I wish, whatever it is you wish, by witnessing and being a part of it, then we believe you can help us shape it to where we can better supply what you guys are looking for.
Mm-hmm. When is your conference?
September 13th through 17th, and it's virtual, so travel will be fairly easy to do.
Okay.
I will email you, Ted. You cannot escape me.
I know Bill Carey says hi to you, Ted. We were talking about your coming today, and he's
Lost you.
Yeah, we lost you, Alan. We can't hear you all of a sudden.
today.
Alan, can you repeat that? We couldn't hear you.
Yeah, sorry. I was just basically telling him that Bill Carey wasn't going to be able to be on today, but we were talking about you, and he was wanting to make sure you knew that he said hello too.
Yep.
Respect what you're doing, and congratulations with your position.
Okay. Tell him hi as well for me.
You bet. So we're running close to time. What I want to remind everyone, we're going to announce our new combined Encountering Innovation and Matchmaking Program conference in the days to come with a of with a email flyer and pointing back to the website along with videos. We've talked about the matchmaking conference being in August, if some of you have heard of that. And Tinker Air Force Base is a direct competition on the very same days. So we want to step out of the way because we really want Tinker and Oklahoma and a lot of what they're doing to be a part of this. So we're moving it down the calendar, and by bringing it into to the Encountering Innovation Conference, we did some brainstorming to decide whether or not it made sense. As I challenged everyone, I said, I don't want to see us do two conferences at the same time, but they're actually separate. I said, what I want to see if we can do this is we put two programs together and that it actually makes sense. It's blended. And I think we figured that out. Part of what we're hoping for is that we're going to reach back out to Encountering Innovation clients all the way back to 2017. Those that are still in innovating and development stages of various forms, we want them to come. If they will, then our second tier, third and fourth tier businesses that are part of the matchmaking can see those. And so we're working hard to develop a way that we can work together. So for a minute, I'm gonna put some of you innovators on the spot for a question, and that is what we're looking for is how can we easily communicate what you're doing and your update, kind of like what David Burnett did earlier, and Michael, where what you're doing can be of benefit to some of the manufacturers that are looking at having a need. I think, so while you're thinking about this, I think we need to do an improved bluff or an updated bluff from everyone. We need to have what I'm going to call a bluff snapshot video based on some of the conversations we've had, where you give a 1 minute, maybe 3 minutes. 3 minutes is a long time if people are doing the billboard effect and just passing by you and listening. 3 minutes is a long time. So really a 1 minute video update to where we can have a lot of advanced manufacturers looking at what you're doing and seeing if there's a reason for them to engage you. So for Michael, and I know Michael, I've already chatted with him. I'm looking forward to talking to Michael further. But for Tom Yoakum, Jim Wilkinson, who else? Michael Warren. For some of you that are innovators on the line, how would you just speak up and tell me what are you thinking? What are some of your initial thoughts, knowing that we're trying to bring advanced manufacturing and innovating manufacturing together with our innovators, where there's possibilities for connections in commerce?
Tom Yoakum here, ICU 360. And first of all, thanks for having these lunch and learns, the opportunity, great conversations today, a lot of good information from Ted, Lori, as always. For us, to answer your question, I think you kind of touched base on it, Alan. The improved and updated bluffs would help a lot, and some very quick quips or just quad charts, simplified. And in this virtual world that we're working in now, I think a small, short video, to your point also, is extremely beneficial. If someone could either do a video short of the technology, or the innovator just was able to give, in their words, an explanation of where they're at, what they're working on, and what they're looking for, that would go out with that quad chart and that updated bluff, I would say, in advance to these meetings. So, and then if those companies were maybe categorized for that matchmaking process, so it's very defined on where that information goes, it might help, kind of narrow down the focus for certain people. To your point earlier, when there's a lot of information and people were walking by and they only have a few moments, maybe if we were able to ascertain who was valuable use of our time and send them out those little, that quip and possibly that video, that's a great idea,
Great, thanks.
especially in the world of virtual, events. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Anyone else? Jim or Michael? All right, hearing none. Michael, were
Can I
you
say
about to
something?
speak?
I don't want to hear myself talk, Alan, but if I may, real quick,
Sure.
I was having some audio trouble earlier, but I really have to give a shout out to the Oklahoma and Kansas SBDCs. They've been extremely beneficial for our small wearable tech, small business startup here in rural Oklahoma to have an outreach all across the country now and to finally be under contract through an SBIR phase 1. We are recently submitted for phase 2. We believe we have a very good submission working with some very great individuals, some of which who are here today, as well as identifying different user needs through different user groups along the way. So it's been a great opportunity, and we want to thank everybody and a lot of people who are on this meeting today. We owe a great deal of gratitude for. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and Alan, I was just going to say, I'll definitely circle back with you offline because I want to brainstorm through how we could help engage on that.
Great. Okay, well, I'm going to open it up for any networking or questions or comments. Anyone wants to say? We are at 1 o'clock, so we really want to try to wrap up the lunch and learn portion and get back into the networking. And I do, and I guess a special thanks, Ted. I sincerely appreciate your time. I realize that this is a big deal getting you here. And so thanks, Laurie. And thank you for taking the time to speak with us today.
You're welcome. My pleasure. And if you have any other questions, please let me know.
All right, we will. We're looking
Yeah.
forward to it.
Be happy to come to your next event.
Great. Thank you, sir.
I don't know that
Any-
anybody has any questions, eh?
I don't see any on the, been trying to look at the chat. I do know that the content today was good. We've got knowing what we're focusing on, taking good notes to where we know how to try to connect. So for the innovators, the most important thing is make sure you stick with us and with your SBDC advisors as we move forward. I do believe this is going to be our best Encountering Innovation conference based on the fact that we're trying to bring and getting the primes into this. And the more you can get into this year, hopefully the more you can help shape what we're trying to make happen for all of us.
Can I add one more important thing?
Yes, ma'am.
Happy birthday, Vicky. I just read that.
Is it not your birthday? It's not her birthday.
Well, who put in there happy birthday, Vicky? Are they joking? Jessica, did you just throw me under the bus?
No, somebody else put it in there first. So I just was being nice and saying happy birthday also. But it's somebody's birthday today. So happy birthday to whoever's birthday it is.
There you go. All right.
Yeah, I would have, if I could have confirmed it, I would have done a secret chat where we could have sung happy birthday to her. But if it's not her birthday, I'm glad we didn't.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks again, Ted, especially on your day off.
You're welcome.
You taking the time.
Yeah,
And
that's
we'll
a big
talk
deal.
soon.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right.
All right, thanks.
And yes, Chris, thanks for your comment in chat. Happy Father's Day to all those fathers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. I'll
All
take
right.
credit. I got 2.
Well, I hope everybody
right.
has a great weekend.
Okay.
Nicole, so I want to ask Nicole and Jessica, we're going to, we're looking forward to sometime in the next few days, the next week, to try to reach out to our SBDC statewide programs to let you know what we're doing, how we're shaping this up, along with our host, for the Encountering Innovation Matchmaking and let you know what we're doing to where you can help us help you by reaching out to your advanced manufacturing, your innovating manufacturing, as well as your tech innovators. We've had some people, when we started to reach out, they're thinking, oh, I'll turn this over to our tech folks. That's fine. The problem is, in most cases, they're looking at just their innovators. And with our primes focus that we're doing, we're looking at a lot more of advanced manufacturing and innovating manufacturing. So there's a different group. In a lot of cases, our tech advisors don't know those people very well because they're not working with them unless they're doing an innovation and they've reached out to them. So for you, Nicole, not having a T designation really doesn't have anything to do with it. And I think for most of our tech states, a lot of what I've seen is that they basically put on a lot of SBIR webinars or seminars. And I'm not knocking that, SBIR, we are too. We're focusing on it, but it can't be, I hope it's not the end all be all, because if you don't get an SBIR, then you don't advance your technology. Well, that's not accurate. You know, there's a lot of ways to advance technology. SBIR is sweet to have in some cases. In some cases, it's a lot of challenge, a lot of work. But anyway, so we're really wanting to reach out to all the states. Would you be willing, would you be able to spend some time on a short conference call where we talk about that? Right.
Yep.
Jessica?
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
And
And
that's
let's-
kind of thing, because it's on our list. Barbara and I have a list that kind of stays on going on our whiteboards. And it's, how do we get our people a little bit more prepared ahead of this, so that month or 5 weeks rolling up to EI is not so stressful and so compact in time. You know, so that's maybe something that we'll get to visit about.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Well, then we got to finish putting our information in a way to where we can create our bluff, and we got to listen to our own advice. So we're going to work on that in the first 2 or 3 days of the week. But now that we know how we're going to shape it, we're excited about it. So that's just kind of added news. And let's see, we've got Happy Father's Day. Yep. Okay, I think we've captured all of the chats. I don't have anything else. Anybody else? Words of wisdom?
Nope, we're good. Well, thank
Okay.
you, everybody. Hope